Hi, I'm Greg Hunter, and this is the weekly news wrap-up for Friday, June 28th, 2013. Russia has NSA leaker Edward Snowden. And isn't this an absolute crazy thing that we're seeing right now in the world? That China and Russia are protecting NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden? Of course, they're doing this to embarrass the Obama administration, and the Obama administration is embarrassed. Why couldn't Snowden come out and blow the whistle here in the U.S.? I mean, that's what happened with the Pentagon Papers and the New York Times in the 70s. The whistleblower there didn't leave the country and even admitted he broke the law. But it was of profound public interest. He was never prosecuted. Today, it's totally different. Totally different. Just before this story broke about 6 weeks ago, I interviewed Professor of Economics and Professor of Law, William Black. He's at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. And he said, and I want to read this quote, "This administration," meaning the Obama administration, "very early on became an enemy of disclosure." And Black goes on to say, "It hates whistleblowers with a passion." I mean, in this era of the IRS and snooping on reporters and IRS coming down on people who are against the current administration, I mean, we never allowed to find out anything the government doesn't want us to find out anymore for fear of, we're going to hurt the war on terror? I mean, that's just simply outrageous. And could somebody please explain the hypocrisy where banks can launder money for countries on the terror list? Big banks, HSBC, Standard Chartered, they're laundering money for Iran in the billions of dollars. Iran funds Hezbollah. That's a terror group. That's the terror group that the Syrian army, or the Free Syrian Army, which is al-Qaeda, is fighting in Syria, which incidentally, more than 100,000 Syrians have now been killed in that bloody, more than 2-year-old civil war. And companies like, a subsidiary of Deloitte & Touche, Deloitte Advisory Group, helped Standard Chartered hide money laundering. And yet none of these banks and none of these companies get anything but a fine. When you help people launder money for countries like Iran, this is supposedly on our terror list, doesn't that hurt our national security? When you hide and cover up laundering money for Iran, which funds Hezbollah, shouldn't there be charges, criminal prosecution? Shouldn't somebody go to jail? Oh, no, just a fine. But yet somebody like Edward Snowden, who did not sell these secrets, who did not work for a foreign government, he just blew the whistle. Oh, they want to come down on him hard, or they say they do. Judge Andrew Napolitano says, I don't think they want to prosecute him because too much would come out in court. When you sue somebody or you prosecute somebody, you get to have discovery. Now, I think, the people in the intelligence community, at least some people, would like to disappear this guy, would like to just make him go away. Maybe he'll go to Ecuador and never be seen again. That's who's offering Edward Snowden asylum. But I think it's a shame that a whistleblower can't come forward here in America, and China and Russia have been protecting our whistleblower. The Federal Reserve has been taking great pains to backpedal on what Fed Chief Ben Bernanke said last week. He was hinting at slowing down the money printing. The Fed calls this tapering. We're printing $85 billion each and every month in an open-ended action until, the economy or unemployment gets better. And even if unemployment gets better, the economy has to get better. And, they had Fed presidents and governors all out this week walking that back. Oh, no, the market's got that wrong. It wasn't what the Fed chief said. The market's got that wrong. I don't think so. I think the market's got it dead on right. Which shows you how weak it is at the very hint of slowing down money printing 6 months from now causes about a 1,000-point drop, 8% in the Dow. And, listen, I think the Fed knew exactly what it was doing. It wanted to see what would happen. It was a little test. Wanted to see how fast it would happen. Well, woo, it happened fast. If they'd have stayed on it, we had 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 points off in the next following week. The Federal Reserve is very calculating. There was never a move to fix the financial system. Please keep that in mind. Never a move to fix the financial system. If there was a move to fix it, we would have taken banks to bankruptcy, to receivership. We'd have kept the banks. We would have written down bad debt. We would have jailed the big bankers that did this crazy stuff and illegal criminal stuff. That's another thing that William Black, who's a professor of law at UMKC, says that, we have felons running the financial institutions. They're laundering money. They're committing securities fraud. They're committing ratings fraud, But we never fixed the system. We instituted phony accounting at the Financial Accounting Standards Board in 2009, FASB. And what we really got was tons of money printing, zero prosecutions of any of the bankers, 0% interest rates as far as the eye can see, at least through 2015. They had no intention of fixing the system, and they have not fixed the system. So what were they testing last week when Ben Bernanke, floated that out about, tapering or slowing the massive money printing that's propping up the entire economy? Well, what were they doing? Was that a test run? Because listen, if they didn't fix it, then they know it's gonna collapse at some point. The only question is when. Meredith Whitney was on just yesterday. She's the banking expert. She's worried about all these municipal bonds and all this debt at the states and county level. And she says, hey, we're in an environment of rates are going to go up. And the Fed can't control these spikes in rates. They think they can't. There's no way. And talk about, things selling off. Well, gold sold off and sold off hard. But, banking expert and also investing expert James Rickards, was also on yesterday on CNBC and said, hey, listen, they know the economy stinks. Here's a headline from yesterday, right? A growth weaker than expected. Yeah, it was revised down to 1.8%. And does that really take into account real inflation? I think not. We're not really getting any real growth. And so Rickard says, hey, listen, basically I'm paraphrasing, we're selling gold below mining costs for a lot of mines. That's not going to go on for long. And the Fed, instead of, tapering or just keeping it the same, they're going to have to increase it in the next couple of months. And gold and silver are headed back up. They're going to have to continue to print money or the system will implode. And we're going to be facing an environment of rising interest rates, according to Meredith Whitney. And she's worried about bankruptcies a la Detroit, which is, bankrupt. Not totally yet, not called it yet, but they bankrupt. They defaulted on a couple of $1 billion in bonds, and they've missed, nearly $40 million in pension payments. So nothing is fixed, and the Fed knows it. The Senate passed an immigration bill by a pretty wide margin, but there were 32 no votes, and the no votes voted no because they say, and I'm simplifying this, that the number one thing that we want fixed isn't fixed. We don't have border security. There is no way this bill gets through the House of Representatives unless border security is truly fixed. The no votes in the Senate, people like Rand Paul say, well, the president can just veto that stuff. That we'll just have amnesty and we'll still have a porous border. And that's why the no voters voted no, and that's why it's going to have a real tough time in the Republican-controlled House of Representatives. The Supreme Court handed down a couple of big decisions. One of them that basically paves the way for gay marriage. They basically, did away with the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA. And then on the other side, they made a key ruling in the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And you know what? I think the Supreme Court got both of them right. As far as gay marriage, listen, gay people are born gay, just like white people are born white, or people like me are born heterosexual. I can't fix that. I can't change that. And a major tenet in the Constitution is equal protection under the law. Period. The end. The Supreme Court got it right. And in the 1965 Voting Rights Act, the Chief Justice, John Roberts, said, a lot's changed since 1965. Yeah, a lot has changed. I hardly think that black people are going to be turned away from the polls in droves because of this change in the 1965 Voting Rights Act. It's not gutted, but they took out, a couple of key provisions, one key provision anyway, about getting permission from the federal government when they want to change something. And one of the things that's going to change is you're going to have an ID to vote. You have to have an ID to drive a car. You have to have an ID to get a car loan. You have to have an ID if a police officer stops you in your car and says, I need to see your driver's license and registration. You can't say, I don't want to give you my driver's license. And a lot has changed since 1965. I mean, we've had, in the Bush administration, back-to-back African-American Secretary of States, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice. And last I checked, the Attorney General of the United States is Eric Holder, an African-American. And, of course, we have a black president. And bravo for that. I don't see how that's going to change a lot in terms of, stopping African-American people from voting. It's just not going to happen. A lot has changed. And thank goodness, a lot has changed since 1965. And finally, remember the big universal settlement that the Iowa Attorney General was pushing? Remember that? He was, they're going to have a $25 billion pool that they're going to, give to these aggrieved homeowners for the robo-signing incident. It would make you think that they just signed documents really fast. They just sloppy. No. Robo-signing was forgery, perjury, and fraud on the court. They illegally stole, big bankers, millions of houses. They call it wrongfully foreclosure. No, I call it illegally stealing millions of houses. And all that $25 billion got cut down. And you know what ended up happening with that? What ended up happening? I'm surprised USA Today covered it this past weekend. And here's what happened. Foreclosure settlement, $1 billion bust. And let me get you right here where it says, let me get that $300. You see this? Most people got a $300 check. That was the billions and billions and billions the big banks were supposed to be paying to make people whole. Now, a few people got, $125,000, but most people, according to the USA Today article, the overwhelming majority of people got a $300 check for having their house stolen from them. Boy, if this is not a country of the banks, by the banks, and for the big banks, I don't know what is. That's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter. Thank you for supporting USAWatchdog.com. Thank you very much for using the donations button. Have a good weekend.